Hello students, welcome back to another session of history. We are on lesson 8, Devotional Paths to the Divine. You may have seen people perform rituals of worship or singing bhajans, kirtans or kavalis, or even repeating the name of God in silence, and noticed that some of them are moved to tears. Such intense devotions or love of God is the legacy of various kinds of bhakti and Sufi movements that have evolved since the 18th century. Now, by the 18th century, many ideas, various kinds of ideas of bhakti and Sufi movement has started evolving. Now, the idea of a supreme God. Before large kingdoms emerged, different groups of people were worshipped. People worshipped their own gods and goddesses. As people were brought together through the growth of towns, trade, and empires, new ideas began to develop. The idea that all living things pass through countless cycles of birth and rebirth, performing good deeds and bad, came to be widely accepted. Similarly, the idea that all human beings are not equal even at birth gained ground during this period. The belief that social privilege came from birth in a noble family or a high caste was the subject of many learned texts. Many people were uneasy with such ideas and turned to the teachings of Buddha or the Jainas, according to which it was possible to overcome social differences and break the cycle of rebirth through personal effort. Others felt attracted to the idea of supreme God who could deliver humans from such bondage if approached with devotion. This idea, advocated in the Bhagavad Gita, grew in popularity in the early centuries of the Common Era. Shiv, Vishnu, and Durga as supreme deities came to be worshipped through elaborate rituals. At the same time, gods and goddesses worshipped in different areas came to be identified with Shiva, Vishnu, or Durga. In the process, local myths and legends became a part of the Puranic stories, and methods of worship recommended in the Puranas were introduced into the local cults. Eventually, the Puranas also laid down that it was possible for devotees to receive the grace of God regardless of the caste status. The idea of bhakti became so popular that even Buddhists and Jainis adopted these beliefs. So, several people showed their interest in the teachings of Buddha or the Jainis. Others felt attracted to the idea of the Supreme God. Such people sought the path of bhakti to approach the Supreme God. As a result, Shiva, Vishnu, and Durga came to be recognized as supreme deities. People began to worship them through elaborate rituals. A new kind of bhakti in South India, Nayanars and Alvars. The 17th to the 9th centuries, saw the emergence of new religious movement led by Narayan, saints devoted to Shiva, and Alvars, saints devoted to Vishnu, who came from all castes including those considered untouchables like the Puliyar and the Panars. They were sharply critical of the Buddhists and Jainis and preached ardent love of Shiva or Vishnu as the path to salvation. They drew upon the ideas of love and heroism as found in the Sangam literature, the earliest example of Tamil literature, composed during the early centuries of the Common Era, and blended them with the values of bhakti. The Nayanars and Alvars went from place to place composing exquisite poems in praise of the deities and shrined in the villages that they visited and set them to music. Now, the 17th to 9th century saw the emergence of new religious movement led by the Narayanas, saints devoted to Shiva, and Alvar, saint devotees to Vishnu, who came from all castes, including untouchables. They criticized the Buddhist and Jainism and preached ardent love towards Shiva or Vishnu as the path of salvation. Between the 10th and 12th centuries, the Chola and Pandya kings built elaborate temples around many of the shrines visited by the saint poets, strengthening the links between the bhakti tradition and temple worship. This was also the time when their poems were compiled. Besides, hagiographics or religious biographies of the Alvars and Nayanars were also composed. Today we use these texts as source for writing histories of the Bhakti tradition. Now, hagiography, writing of saints' lives. So, hagiography is the writing of the saints' lives. In figure 2, a bronze image of Manika Vasagar. This is the image of Manika Vasagar. Philosophy and Bhakti. Shankara, one of the most influential philosophers of India, was born in Kerala in the 8th century. He was an advocate of Advaita, or the doctrine of the oneness of the individual soul and the supreme God, which is the ultimate reality. He taught the Brahman the only or ultimate reality was formless around us, formless and without any attributes. He considered the world around us to be an illusion or Maya, and preached renunciations of the world and adoptions of the path of knowledge to understand the true nature of Brahman and attain salvation. So Shankara, a Bhakti saint, was an advocate of Advaita, or the doctrine of the oneness of the individual soul and the supreme God, which is the ultimate reality. He preached renunciation of the world and adoption of the path of knowledge. Ramanuja, born in Tamil Nadu in the 11th century, was deeply influenced by the Alvars. According to him, the best means of attaining salvation was through intense devotion to Vishnu. Vishnu, in his grace, helps the devotee to attain the bliss of union with him. He propounded the doctrine of Vishwatvaita, or qualified oneness, in that the soul, even when united with the Supreme God, remained distinct. Ramanuja's doctrine greatly inspired the new strand of bhakti which developed in North India subsequently. So Ramanuja, another bhakti saint, was deeply influenced by the Alvars. According to him, the best means of attaining salvation was through intense devotion to Vishnu. Now, Vasavana's Virashvisham. We noted earlier the connection between the Tamil Bhakti movement and temple worship. This is in turn led to reaction that is best represented in the Virashaiva movement initiated by Vasavana and his companions like Alama, Prabhu and Akamahadevi. This movement began in Karnataka in the mid-12th century. The Virashivas argued strongly for the equality of all human beings and against Brahmanical ideas about caste and treatment of women. They were also against all forms of rituals and idol worship. So, Virashaiva movement was initiated by Varasavana and his companion. This movement began in Karnataka in the mid 12th century. The Virashavas were against all forms of rituals and idol worships. They were against the Brahmanical ideas, that is, about the caste and the ill treatments given to the women. The saints of Maharashtra. From the 13th to the 17th centuries, Maharashtra saw a great number of saint poets whose song is simple Marathi continued to inspire people. The most important among them was Janeshwar, Namdev, Eknath and Tukaram, as well as women like Shakubai and the family of Chokhamela, who belonged to the untouchable. Mahar caste, this religion tradition of bhakti focused on the Vitthal, a form of Vishnu, temple in Pandarpur, as well as on the notion of a personal God residing in the hearts of all people. The saint poets rejected all forms of ritualism, outward display of pity, and social differences based on birth. In fact, they even rejected the idea of renunciation and preferred to live with their families, earning their livelihood like any other person, while humbly serving fellow human beings in need. A new humanist idea emerged as they insisted that bhakti lay in sharing others' pain. As a famous Gujarati saint Narsi Mehta said, they are Vishnuvas who understand the pain of others. So the saint of Maharashtras, the saint poets such as Janeshwar, Namdev, Eknath and Tukaram, as well as women like Sakubai and the family of Chokmela, inspired people through their songs in simple Marathi. These saints rejected all forms of rituals, outward display of pity and social differences based on birth. They also rejected the idea of renunciation and preferred to live with their families. Nathpanthis, Siddhas and Yogis. A number of religious groups that emerged during this period criticized the ritual and other aspects of conventional religion and the social order using simple logical arguments. Among them were the Nathpanthis, Siddhacharas and Yogis. They advocated renunciation of the world. To them, the path to salvation lay in meditations on the formless ultimate reality and the realization of oneness with it. To achieve this, they advocated instant training of the mind and body through practices like yogasana, breathing exercises, and meditation. These groups became particularly popular among low caste. Their criticism of conventional religion created the ground for devotional religion to become a popular force in the northern India. So several other religion groups such as the Nathpanthis, Siddhas and Yogis are also criticized the rituals and other aspects of conventional religion and their social order. They advocated renunciation of the world. They inspired people to lay in meditation on the formless ultimate reality and their realization of oneness with it. They gave importance to yoga asanas. Islam and Sufism. The Sants had much in common with the Sufis, so much that it is believed that they adopted many ideas of each other. Sufis were Muslim mystics. They rejected outward religiosity and emphasized love and devotion to God and compassion towards all fellow human beings. Islam propagated strict monotheism or submissions to one God. It has also rejected idol worship and considerable simplified rituals of worship into collective prayers. At the same time, Muslim scholars developed a holy law called Shairat. The Sufis often rejected the elaborate rituals and codes of behavior demanded by Muslim religious scholars. They sought union with God much as love seeks his beloved with a disregard for the world. Like the saint poets, the Sufis too composed poems expressing their feelings and a rich literature in prose, including anecdotes and fables develop around them. Among the great Sufis of Central Asia were Ghazali, Rumi, and Sadi. Like the Nadpanthis, Siddhas, and Yogis, the Sufis too believe that the heart can be trained to look at the world in a different way. They developed elaborate methods of training using zikr, chanting of a name or sacred formula, contemplations, sama, rags, discussions of parables, breath control, etc., under the guidance of a master or peer. Thus emerged the silsilas, a genealogy of Sufi teachers, each following a slightly different method of instructions and ritual practice. So, Sufis were Muslim mystics. They rejected outward religiosity and emphasized and devotions to God and comprises towards all fellow beings. A large number of Sufis from Central Asia settled in Hindustan from the 11th century onward. This process was strengthened with the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, when several major Sufi centers developed all over the subcontinent. The Chishti Silsila was among the most influential orders. It had a long line of teachers like Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti of Ajmer, Kutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki of Delhi, Baba Farid of Punjab, Khwaja Nizamuddin Aluli of Delhi, and Bandanawaz Gizudarza of Gulbarga. So these were the teachers of the Sufi saint. The Sufi masters held their assemblies in their khangas or hospice. Devotees of all descriptions, including members of the royalty and nobility and ordinary people, flocked to these khangas. They discussed spiritual matters, sought the blessings of the saints in solving their worldly problems, or simply attended the music and dance session. Often people attributed Sufi masters with miraculous power that could relieve others of their illnesses and troubles. The tomb or dargah of a Sufi saint became a place of pilgrimage to which thousands of people of all faiths thronged. So here we saw that Islam propagated monotheism, that is, submission to one God. It rejected idol worship. Muslim scholars developed a holy law called Shairat. The Sufis, they rejected the elaborate rituals and codes of behavior demanded by Muslim religious scholars. The Sufis too composed poems like the saint poets. Some of the great Sufis were Ghazali, Rumi, and Sadi. The Sufi saints developed elaborate methods of training using zikr, then contemplation, sama, rags, discussions of parables, breath control, etc., under the guidance of a master or peer. Thus emerged the silsila. Then the Sufi teachers held their assemblies in the khankas or hospice, that means houses of rest for travelers. Then here they discuss spiritual matters. Sufi shrines are visited by devotees of all backgrounds. Next, new religious developments in North India. The period after the 13th century saw a new wave of the Bhakti movement in North India. This was an age when Islam, Brahmanical Hinduism, Sufism, various strands of Bhakti, and the Natpanthis, Siddhas, and Yogis influenced one another. We saw that new towns and kingdoms were emerging, and people were taking up new professions and finding new roles for themselves. Such people, especially craftspersons, peasants, traders, and laborers, thronged to listen to these new saints and spread their ideas. Some of them, like Kabir and Baba Guru Nanak, rejected all orthodox religions. Others, like Tulsidas and Surdas, accepted existing beliefs and practice but wanted to make this accessible to all. Tulsidas conceived of God in the form of Rama. Tulsidas' composition, the Ram Charitamanas, written in Awadhi, a language used in eastern Uttar Pradesh, is important both as an expressions of his devotions and as a literary work. Surdas was an ardent devotee of Krishna. His composition, compiled in the Sursagara, Surasaravali and Sahita Lahari, expresses his devotions. Also contemporary was Shankar Deva of Assam, who emphasized devotion to Vishnu and composed poems and plays in Assamese. He began the practice of setting up namghars or houses of recitations and prayer, a practice that continues to date. These traditions also included saints like Datu Dayal, Ravidas, and Mirabai. Mirabai was a Rajput princess married into the royal family of Mewar in the 16th century. Mirabai became a disciple of Ravidas, a saint from a caste considered untouchable. She was devotee to Krishna and composed innumerable bhajans expressing her intense devotion. Her songs also openly challenged the norms of the upper caste and became popular with the masses in Rajasthan and Gujarat. A unique feature of most of the saints is that their works were composed in regional language and could be sung. They became immensely popular and were handed down orally from generation to generation. Usually, the poorest, most deprived communities and women transmitted these songs, often adding their own expressions. Thus, the songs as we have them today are as much a creation of the saints as of generations of people who sang them. They have become a part of a living popular culture. Now a song composed by Mirabai. Ranaji, I have left your norms of shame and false decorum of the princely life. I have left your town, and yet, Rana, why have you kept up enmity against me? Rana, you gave me a cup of poison. I drank it laughingly. Rana, I will not be destroyed by you, and yet, Rana, why have you kept up enmity against me? A closer look, Kabir. Kabir, who probably lived in the 15th, 16th centuries, was one of the most influential saints. He was brought up in a family of Muslim julahas or weavers settled in or near the city of Banaras, presently known as Varanasi. We have little reliable information about his life. We get to know of his ideas from a vast collection of verses called Shakis and pairs said to have been composed by him and sung by wandering bhajan singers. Some of these were later collected and preserved in the Guru Granth Sahib, Panchvani and Bijak. Kabir's teachings were based on a complete, indeed vehement rejections of the major religious traditions. His teaching openly ridiculed all forms of external worship of both Brahmanical Hinduism, and Islam, the preeminence of the priestly classes, and the caste system. The language of his poetry was a form of spoken Hindi widely understood by ordinary people. He also sometimes used cryptic language which is required difficult to follow. Kabir believed in a formless supreme God and preached that the only path to salvation was through bhakti or devotion. Kabir drew his followers from among both Hindus and Muslims. A closer look, Baba Guru Nanak. We know more about Baba Guru Nanak than about Kabir. Born at Talwandi, he travelled widely before establishing a center at Karatpur. A regular worship that consisted of the singing of his own regular worship of hymns was established there for his followers. Irrespective of their former creed, caste, or gender, his followers ate together in the common kitchen that is known as langar. The sacred space thus created by Baba Guru Nanak was known as Dharamshal. It is now known as Gurudwara. Before his death in 1539, Baba Guru Nanak appointed one of his followers as his successor. His name was Lena, but he came to be known as Guru Angad, signifying that he was part of Baba Guru Nanak himself. Guru Angad compiled the compositions of Baba Guru Nanak, to which he added his own in a new script known as Gurumukhi. The three successors of Guru Angad also wrote under the name of Nanak, and all of their compositions were compiled by Guru Arjan in 1604. To this compilation were added the writings of other figures like Sheikh Farid, Sant Kabir, Bhagat Namdev, and Guru Tegh Bahadur. In 1706, this compilation was authenticated by his son and successor, Guru Gobind Singh. It is now known as Guru Granth Sahib, the only scripture of the Sikhs. The number of Baba Guru Nanak's followers increased through the 16th century under his successor. They belonged to a number of castes but traders, agriculturists, artisans, and craftsmen predominated. This may have something to do with Baba Guru Nanak's instance that these followers must be householders and should adopt productive and useful occupation. They were also expected to contribute to the general funds of the community of followers. So, a new wave of bhakti movement that came or began in North India after the 13th century. Then this was the age of when Islam, Brahmanical, Hinduism, Sufism and various strands of bhakti and the Natpati, Sudhas and Yogis influenced one another. Then the works of the saints were composed in regional languages and therefore they became very popular. Then Guru Nanak emphasizes the importance of the worship of one God. He insisted that caste, creed or gender was irrelevant for attaining liberation. He used the term Nam, Dan and Insani for the essence of his teachings, which actually meant right worship, welfare of others and purity of conduct. By the beginning of the 17th century, the town of Ramdaspur, Amritsar had developed around the central Gurudwara called Harmandir Sahib, Golden Temple. So before the Golden Temple, it was named as Harmandir Sahib. It was virtually self-governing and modern historians refer to the early 17th century Sikh community as a state within the state. The Mughal Emperor Jahangir looked upon them as a potential threat and he ordered the execution of Guru Arjan in 1606. The Sikh movement began to get politicized in the 17th century, a development which culminated in the institutions of the Khalsa by Guru Gobind Singh in 1699. The community of the Sikhs called the Khalsa Panth became a political entity. The changing historical situation during the 16th and the 17th centuries influenced the development of the Sikh movement. The ideas of Baba Guru Nanak had a huge impact on this development from the very beginning. He emphasized the importance of the worship of one God. He insisted that caste, creed, or gender was irrelevant for attaining liberation. His idea of liberation was not that of a state of inner bliss, but rather the pursuit of active life with a strong sense of social commitment. He himself used the term Nam, Dan, and Insan for the essence of his teaching, which actually meant right worship, welfare of others, and purity of conduct. His teachings are now remembered as Nam Japna, Krit Karna, and Vand Chakna, which also underline the importance of right belief in worship, honest living, and helping others. Thus, Baba Guru Nanak's idea of equality had social and political implication. This might partly explain the difference between the history of the followers of Baba Guru Nanak and the history of the followers of the other religious figures of the medieval centuries, like Kabir, Ravidas, and Dadu, whose ideas were very similar to those of Baba Guru Nanak. So, this is the end of the chapter. Next time I will meet you with a fresh new chapter. Till then, students, take care of yourself and thank you so much.